Every winter in homes across North America, millions of people do the same thing. They walk to a thermostat before dawn and turn a dial. The furnace kicks on, the bill arrives, they pay it, then they do it again next year. The U.S. Energy Information Administration's residential energy consumption data puts the average American household's annual heating cost at just over $1,100. That is $1,100 for a problem that a Norse settler standing on the Greenland coast in 985 CE, in temperatures that regularly dropped below -40, had already solved, permanently, with rocks. Not a furnace burning through the night, not a wood stack that needed feeding every 3 hours. Rocks. A specific weight of specific stone arranged in a specific geometry around a fire that burned for 2 hours and then went out. And the reason you have never seen this in a modern building guide has nothing to do with whether it still works. It works. The reason is that it cannot be invoiced. There is no monthly rate for a thermal property that lives inside a rock you picked up off the ground. There is one specific decision Norse builders made about the geometry of stone around their central hearths. Visible in the excavated structures that Helga Ingstad and Anne Stein Ingstad spent 8 years uncovering at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, beginning in 1960. That turned a simple fire surround into a system that held a structure above freezing for 8 hours after the last flame died. Not the fire size, not the fuel type. One decision about the angle and mass of the stone. It is coming up. The picture most people have of a Norse longhouse is drafts, smoke, cold seeping through the walls after midnight. That picture is accurate about one thing: the smoke. Else Rosdahl in The Vikings, published by Penguin in 1987, documents longhouse wall construction across Norse sites in Iceland and Norway. Turf walls, up to 2 meters thick, with a rubble stone core running through the center. In a modern stick frame house, the wall between you and the outside air is roughly 15 centimeters of insulated framing. In the longhouse at Stung, Iceland, buried and preserved nearly intact by the eruption of Hekla volcano around 1104 CE, and first excavated by archaeologist Daniel Brun in 1905, that wall was over 6 feet of compressed turf and stone rubble. That is not a wall, that is a storage heater with a roof attached to it. But the walls held heat. They did not generate it. The generation happened at the hearth. And what the Norse did at the hearth is where the $1,100 annual bill becomes a solved problem. The American HVAC industry generated over $130 billion in 2023, according to IBIS World's Domestic HVAC Market Report. That number exists because you keep turning the dial. It requires you to believe that the only way to heat a space is to burn something continuously and move the result through ducts or pipes or electric elements. A Norse crew sailing from Eric the Red's Greenland settlement at Brattahlid to the coast of Newfoundland around 1000 CE, a crossing documented in the Grenlandinga saga and confirmed by the Lance aux Meadows excavation, did not test their heating techniques in comfortable conditions. They tested them in open ocean crossings, in sub-zero air, in a structure where the wind came off pack ice and the nearest resupply was 3 weeks of sailing away. If the heating solution failed, the crew did not call a service number, not struggled, died. But here's the part the heating industry never needed you to ask about: exactly how the stone geometry worked. That is what comes next. This is not a new idea. The principle is older than the Norse. But what the excavation record at Lance aux Meadows shows, and what Anne Stein Ingstad documented in detail in The Norse Discovery of America, co-authored with Helga Ingstad and published in English in 1985 by Norwegian University Press, is that Norse builders had refined stone placement to a specific, repeated system. The same hearth geometry appears at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, at the Stong farmstead in Iceland, and at the Borgar Lofoten Longhouse in northern Norway, excavated by Gerd Stamso Munch and published by Tapir Academic Press in 2003. It is not coincidence. It is the deliberate transmission of a working technique across a settlement network spanning 3,000 miles of open ocean. The material they preferred was soapstone, Kleberstein in Norse. You have seen soapstone in modern kitchens. It is the dense, slightly gray stone used in high-end countertops, specifically because it holds heat without cracking. Soapstone hearth linings and cooking vessels have been found at Birka, the trading settlement on Lake Mellerin in Sweden occupied from approximately 750 to 975 CE, and at Hedeby, the major Norse commercial port on the Jutland Peninsula, active from 800 to 1050 CE, both documented in Rosdahl's The Vikings. The Norse traded soapstone across their entire network, from quarries in Norway to Iceland, from Iceland to Greenland, from Greenland, almost certainly, to Lance aux Meadows. Not as decoration, as infrastructure. Think of a thick cast iron pan versus a thin aluminum one. The aluminum pan heats in 2 minutes and goes cold in 5. The cast iron takes 15 minutes to reach full temperature and stays warm for an hour after you turn the burner completely off. The denser the material, the more heat it can absorb, and the more slowly it releases that heat back into the room. Scientists call this thermal mass. the ability of a dense object to absorb, store, and steadily radiate heat energy over time. Soapstone has among the highest thermal mass of any common building material, higher than granite, higher than fired brick. Per pound, it holds more heat and releases it more slowly and steadily than almost any rock you will find in a stream bed. Norse builders had no formula for this. They had generations of direct observation. They knew which stone stayed warm longest after the fire died. They quarried that stone. They transported it across open water to settlements where it did not exist naturally. The entire Norse settlement network, from the Icelandic farms, catalogued in the Landnámabók, the medieval Icelandic land registry, compiled around 1100 CE, to the Greenland farms at Brattahlid, established by Eric the Red around 985 CE, and described in the Grenlandinga saga, was heated by this one physical principle repeated precisely across every structure. Then, in the decades following 1880, the American central heating industry built itself entirely around active combustion systems and fuel delivery. The American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers, founded in 1894, their founding records are preserved in the ASHRAE Institutional Archive. Standardized heating practice around equipment that burned fuel and required ongoing purchase. Passive thermal mass design was not disproven. It was not refuted. It simply became unmarketable. Not wrong, inconvenient. There's no billing cycle for a stone you already own. There's no service agreement for a physical property that does not degrade, does not require annual maintenance, and cannot be remotely switched off. A Norse builder at Stong, Iceland solved overnight cold permanently, and then for 130 years, the industry that replaced that solution has collected $1,100 per household per year for the same outcome. What one Norse builder understood about soapstone and 2 hours of controlled fire, and what you're about to replicate for nothing, begins with one physical principle so simple it fits in a single sentence. Every crew that operated across that 3,000-mile Norse network, from Hedeby on the Jutland Peninsula to the Greenland Eastern Settlement to the camp at Lens aux Meadows, solved overnight cold without a heating contract, without a bill, without a supplier, without a service call in February. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reports the average American household spends over $1,100 per year to stay warm. Norse settlers at Brattahlid, in conditions that make a Minnesota winter look mild, spent nothing on that outcome. The thermal physics has not changed by a single variable since 985 CE, and almost nobody is using it. If this channel is new to you, this is what we do here. We find the techniques the Norse actually used, verified by named excavations and named historians, and show you exactly how to apply them now. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want the next one. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. You have felt a stone wall on a hot afternoon, still radiating warmth 2 hours after the sun moved off it. You have burned your hand on a cast iron skillet sitting on a cold burner long after you turned the heat off. You have noticed that a brick fireplace surround stays warm to the touch for hours after the fire is out, long past the point where the flue has drawn every trace of combustion heat up and out of the room. That is not a coincidence. That is thermal mass operating exactly as Norse builders designed it to operate. Here is the thing most people miss. The fire is not the heater. The fire is the charger. The stone is the heater. Once you see that distinction, the entire Norse system makes immediate sense, and every modern heating bill looks like what it is, a subscription to something that was solved for free 1,000 years ago. There's one specific thing about the geometry of how Norse builders arrange that stone, the one decision most people get wrong when they try to replicate this, and it is the very first decision that separates something that keeps a room warm until dawn from something that goes cold by midnight. Here's what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. Dense, non-porous stone, free if you know exactly what you're looking for. You will know in 60 seconds. A simple cast iron fire grate or firebox, already owned by most people who heat with wood. If you need one, a basic cast iron grate runs $15 to $20 at any farm supply or hardware store. That is genuinely it. Here's the one thing most people get wrong. They use river stones. This seems completely logical. River stones are smooth, dense-looking, and free. They are everywhere. And for the first 30 minutes of heating, they seem to perform perfectly. Then one splits with a sound like a rifle shot. Riverstones spend decades or centuries submerged in water. That water works its way into microfractures inside the stone that you cannot see with the naked eye. When you heat that stone rapidly, the way a fire heats it, the trapped moisture turns to steam before it can escape through the fractures. The pressure builds inside the crack, and the stone fails the same way a sealed container fails when you put it in a fire. This is not a rare outcome. It is the standard outcome with riverstone and heat. The Norse crews working Iceland and Greenland, where volcanic basalt and soapstone were the dominant local stone, did not make this mistake because their available material was already correct. But the Coppergate excavation in York, conducted by Peter Addyman and Richard Hall beginning in 1976 and documented in the York Archaeological Trust's published reports, shows Norse settlers working in the British Isles consistently selecting specific stone types for their hearths. Dense, non-porous igneous rock, visually identified by the absence of visible grain, layering, or surface sparkle. The principle is simple. A stone that traps water will fail when heated. A stone that cannot trap water will not. Here is exactly how you tell the difference before you pick up a single stone. Dense, non-porous stone has no visible layers or sedimentary banding. It has no surface pitting. It has no mica, no sparkle when you tilt it in light. Granite is acceptable when it is tight-grained and matte. Basalt is excellent. Soapstone is the Norse preference, identifiable by a slightly waxy or soapy surface feel. It does not scratch easily and it does not absorb moisture. If you press your tongue briefly to the surface of a stone and it feels like touching a ceramic tile, dense, cool, and dry, that stone is correct. If it feels like touching a wet clay pot, porous and slightly absorbent, pass on it. The test takes 3 seconds per stone. The Norse did a version of it every time they built a new hearth in unfamiliar territory. Now you are building. Begin with the floor surface. You need non-combustible material between the fire and anything that can burn. The Norse hearths at Lance O Meadows sat on compacted earthen floors with a base of flat stones, exactly as Anne Stein-Ingstad documented in The Norse Discovery of America. If you are working on a wooden floor, lay flat stone slabs as a base layer first. 2 to 3 inches of flat, dense stone slab between the firebox and the floor below you. Select 8 to 12 stones for the surround itself. Each stone should weigh between 15 and 25 pounds, roughly the weight of a large cantaloupe on the low end and a small watermelon on the high end. You want a total surround mass of at least 150 pounds of dense stone. More is better. Mass is the mechanism. Every additional pound of stone is additional hours of stored heat. The physics behind that number. A 200-pound surround of dense stone heated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit above room temperature holds roughly 17,000 BTUs of stored thermal energy. Released slowly over 8 to 10 hours, that is equivalent to running a standard space heater on its lowest setting through an entire night, without burning a single additional piece of fuel. Now the geometry. Stand the stones vertically around 3 sides of the firebox, back wall on both sides. Leave the side facing into the room completely open. The enclosed 3 sides are your heat battery. The open face is where the warmth radiates into the space. Here's the step most people skip, and it is the one that separated a Norse settlement that stayed warm through the night from one that did not. Tilt each standing stone slightly inward, not flat vertical. Angled, so the face of each stone leans toward the fire at roughly 10 degrees from true vertical. When a stone stands perfectly flat, its face receives radiant heat only from directly in front of it. Tilt it inward 10 degrees, and the face receives radiant heat from the fire and from the stone surfaces on the opposite side simultaneously. The Norse hearths at Stung, Iceland, measured and described in the National Museum of Iceland's excavation records from the 1970s, held in the museum's archaeological archive, show this consistent inward angle across multiple hearth structures at the same site. That 10-degree tilt is not decorative. It is the geometry of maximum heat absorption. Set a moderate fire inside the surround. Not a large, fast fire. You're not trying to produce maximum flame height. You're trying to produce maximum stone temperature over a 2 to 3 hour period. A large, fast fire wastes the majority of its heat straight up the flue. A moderate fire burning steadily for 2 to 3 hours saturates the stone mass evenly from base to top. Let the fire burn without adding large fuel after the first 2 hours. You want steady, sustained heat, not peaks. After 2 hours, add 1 final charge of dense hardwood and let it burn completely to coals. Then let the coal bed die without interference. Do not smother it, do not cover it, let it breathe to ash on its own timeline. The stone is now fully charged. It will radiate warmth into the room for the next 6 to 10 hours, depending on total stone mass and how cold the outside air is. You do not need to touch it. You do not need to add fuel. The physics runs on its own. Here is how you know it is working. Hold your open palm 6 inches from the face of one of the large surround stones, not touching. 6 inches of air between your hand and the stone face. If you feel clear, steady, radiant warmth, like standing 6 inches from an electric burner set to its lowest setting, the stone has charged correctly and is operating exactly as Norse hearths at Lonso Meadows operated. If you feel nothing after full burn, one of 3 things happened. The stone has insufficient total mass, the stone was not heated for long enough, or the stone type is wrong and is releasing heat too quickly. Replace stones one at a time with denser material and repeat the process. That test takes 10 seconds. A child can perform it. What you just built is what a Norse settler at Lance O Meadows used to hold a structure above freezing in Newfoundland winter. in air cold enough to crystallize your breath before it dispersed. If this is the kind of build this channel covers and you want the next one, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every technique here is verified against named archaeological sources. That is the standard this channel holds itself to, and it is not negotiable. 1 stone surround heats 1 room. Heats. What a family of 4 does with 3 stone surrounds, 1 central, 1 per sleeping area, begins to look exactly like the layout documented at the Borg Eilaften Longhouse in northern Norway, one of the largest Norse longhouses ever excavated, where 3 distinct hearth stations served 3 functional zones of a single large structure. Gerd Stamsø-Munch's 2003 Tapir academic press publication describes this multi-hearth arrangement as standard practice in large Norse domestic buildings. 3 surrounds at 200 pounds each, 600 pounds of charged stone radiating heat simultaneously through a winter night. No gas line, no electricity, no meter running in the background. Now scale that to what Eric the Red's eastern settlement in Greenland represented at its peak. A community of roughly 400 Norse settlers, documented in the Grenlandinga Saga and in archaeological surveys conducted by the National Museum of Denmark across multiple decades. 400 people, sub-Arctic conditions, heating fuel limited to whatever driftwood and compressed peat the coast provided, no supply ships arriving with fuel in January. The northeastern settlement operated continuously for over 400 years, from approximately 985 CE until sometime in the early 15th century, in conditions that modern engineers consider uninhabitable without industrial-grade heating systems. They used stone. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. There is one condition where this system performs less efficiently than the rest of the Norse record suggests. The way they accounted for it is the last thing in this script. High ambient humidity limits thermal mass performance. This is not a failure of the stone or the physics. It is a constraint of the physics. When surrounding air humidity sits consistently above 70%, in coastal climates, unventilated basement spaces, or rooms without regular air movement, dense stone begins to absorb atmospheric moisture through surface contact. That surface moisture creates a thin insulating boundary layer on the stone face that slows heat transfer into the room. The stone holds the same amount of energy. It simply cannot release it as efficiently through a wet air layer. The Norse settlement record addresses this constraint directly. Every major longhouse site with documented hearth construction also shows evidence of deliberate air circulation design built into the structure itself. At Lanso Meadows, the entrance corridor, what Anne Steiningstad describes in The Norse Discovery of America as the cold trap vestibule design, created a consistent pressure differential that moved interior air continuously, keeping inside humidity meaningfully lower than outside conditions even in coastal Newfoundland. The modern solution is identical to the Norse one. Move air across the stone face. A small fan directing room air across the surround surface breaks the moisture boundary layer and restores heat transfer to near full efficiency. The physics does not care what century it is operating in, or whether the air is being moved by a pressure differential in a turf entrance corridor or a $12 box fan. The hearthstones at Lanso Meadows are still there. Under Parks Canada protection since the site's UNESCO World Heritage designation in 1978, the stones that a Norse crew placed on the Newfoundland coast around 1000 CE remain in their excavated position. The thermal mass still works. The specific geometry of inward tilted dense stone that held that structure above freezing in a Newfoundland winter, in air cold enough to kill an unprotected person in under an hour, still operates by the same physics it operated by when Leif Erikson's crew lit their first fire there. The stone did not change. The physics did not change. What you just built is the same thing. I do not know what brought you here today. Maybe a heating bill. Maybe a general sense that something simpler existed before someone made it expensive. It does not matter. It works either way.